So I'm going to start with this question. Where did you attend undergrad or graduate school, whatever, university, and what did you study?
Yeah, so I attended Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and I studied, I went into recreation parks and tourism administration. I knew I wanted to work in sports at some point. And I kind of went in with the goal of being an athletic director or professional or potentially going to professional sports. So I did that program and I did concentrations in special event planning and sports management. Really enjoyed that experience and also really loved San Luis Obispo. So I stayed there and continued to work and did my master's degree there as well. And I did that in higher education, counseling and guidance, so student affairs focus. And I did that because at that point I was actually exploring going into like academic advising for like student athletes. So that student athlete development piece that you were talking about, I was really interested in that and potentially going down that path. And so I did that program. Obviously it didn't end up going that route, but I found that that degree was really useful. So yeah, it was a master's in education.
I have a lot of friends that are student athletes at Cal Poly, so it's not a, it's always a place that I know well.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you kind of took, well, now that I know that you always wanted to follow something within sports, did you have something specifically that drove you to wanting to have a career in sports, or was it something that you kind of, I don't want to say realized one day because it doesn't happen like that, but maybe was there, I don't know, something that happened that made you feel like you absolutely love it and so you wanted to follow that, or have you always been a fan, let's say, of sports? You loved it, love the industry. Mm.
Yeah, I think I always loved sports and I always loved events. And so I think that always kind of was a driving factor as I wanted to be a part of that event production. That initially that was kind of my drivers. Like I wanted to be a part of that event production that happens within sports. And for me, it's the feeling I get when I'm in a stadium or I'm in an athletic facility and the fact that sport really is a uniting factor and it brings all these people together in one place. And I think that is really unique. You can have so many different people from literally all over the world, different places, cultures, backgrounds, beliefs, and they can unite over one thing for a moment in time. And I think that's really cool. And so that has always been something that drove me. And I think in working with student athletes and working in higher education, I've always wanted to find a way to give back and help others. And that's looked very different throughout my career. But I think student athletes and I'm sure as you know, as one, we ask you to do a lot. It's you are pictures and everything that come with that. And so I think supporting students in general, but specifically student athletes, also in just helping you be successful and whether you decide to pursue a professional career or to seek a different type of career afterwards, setting you up for success so you can have good experience in that way. So I think that's a couple different things have contributed to that, but that was it for me. And I wasn't a student athlete. I always look back and I'm like, I should probably have taken a different path in my athletic career just because I chose sports that are really difficult to do that. I was tennis, which is just a beast in its own. And I played club when I was in college, but decided not to go that route. And then I was a secondary black belt. So I was in Taekwondo for years and years and years. And you can't really get scholarship for that. So I think also just the fact that I never got to participate as a student athlete also has motivated me because I just want to be involved in that way. So
that's cool you bring that up because I play tennis. So
oh, nice. Oh, very cool.
So that's really nice to hear that someone else in the NCAA also played tennis, because I always hear soccer, swimming, gymnastics, and I rarely hear tennis. So I'm always like, oh, that's cool, team sports and whatever. And tennis is so individual and like people forget how demanding it is as well. So that's really cool to hear. But no, I admire.
I mean, you have to be.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I've lost you for a second. What did you say, Martina?
That's okay, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I mean, that's a huge shout out to you because tennis is so incredibly competitive, especially in Southern California. Like to get a scholarship, you have to be playing tournaments every single weekend. You have to be ranked, and it's a beast to get in. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to commit the time to those tournaments and do that. So that's awesome that you were able to do that and get a scholarship. That's so cool.
It was a very long childhood. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it because it is a
Oh yeah.
tough sport. Southern California being one of the stronger sections as well, it was never really easy to kind of live a normal teenage life just
No.
because I know it's tough, it sacrifices in that aspect, but I enjoyed it. It's Southern California. It could have been in a much worse place, in my opinion,
Yeah.
honestly, because still
Mhm.
it was California. But no, you brought up a good point before when you talked about advising and how you can always give so much to student athletes and how you want kind of to be like a mentor for them. And that's exactly what I admired when I was a freshman. That, well, first of all, in Italy, we don't have anything even close related to the NCAA. So even
Mhm.
though I grew up in America, I already knew how it worked, but still was a different environment for me just because in Italy, nothing like this exists. You either go pro or you quit, basically.
Yeah.
Nobody
Right.
really
Mhm.
sees sports as anything really vital, let's say?
Yeah.
So you saying that, like, being and advising and wanting to help out the students and helping them pick a career, like, I admire that so much, which is also something I'm interested in just because when I was a freshman, that's the help I received and it's the help I
Mhm.
want to give back. So
Yeah.
it makes me happy to hear because it is such a big part of the NCAA as well, just in general.
Mhm. Oh,
Because
definitely.
student athletes make up, I would say, a big part of what the NCAA is. So it's
Yeah.
always it's nice to hear, different opinions because I've heard differently as well. But nice to hear when someone else obviously agrees with what I have in mind as well. But
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
so what position do you hold currently?
So my position just recently changed. I got promoted, so now I'm the senior assistant athletics director for development.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so now I oversee two teams. I oversee development operations. So that's basically donor and fan and supporter engagement, a lot of external relations, and then an annual giving team that works specifically with our 30 individual sports
Mhm.
to help them reach their annual fund goals.
Um, what would you say are common entry level jobs for I want to say, well, I'll modify that question a little bit, but for getting to your position now, what would you say one would follow? Like what path? How do you start kind of, getting started at least?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, I started at the bottom. I did entry level, and I started off really as like an event coordinator, and then moved up kind of through the ranks there. I'm hiring right now for a couple positions that are a little bit more entry level, and it's hard because entry level is like 1 to 3 years of experience, so
Right,
that's always a
right.
misleading thing too. But I think any kind of coordinator level, or assistant kind of like office coordinator kind of thing is a good place to start. And I think across the board, it looks different in different arenas. I think having a grad degree definitely helps. It kind of gives you that extra boost where you could move into a position that maybe you would be able to get otherwise. But I'd say probably that kind of level of coordinator position.
Um, how would you say most people get into this field? Is there certain like requirements? Well, now you said like a grad degree probably is helpful. But would you say there's a typical path people should usually take if they want to get within maybe the NCAA or this sector in particular? Or would you say it's kind of, I don't want to say very like open, but as long as you have knowledge and you have the degree, of course, that has to pertain to the job, like do you think that would be, I don't wanna say good enough, but in a way, like, enough, yeah.
So if we're talking like broadly, as far as like, let's say working at a university in college athletics,
Mhm.
it is highly competitive, right? Because who doesn't want to work in athletics, right? It's you get to be people who are fans of sport, who are student athletes, alums, they all want to work there. So I will say it's highly competitive to get a job. So, I mean, a lot of people apply for 10, 20 positions, entry level and may not,
Mhm.
get it if it's, maybe not the right fit for what that university is looking for. So, I mean, people do grad internships. I mean, I think it depends on what path you want to take. If you can do a grad internship with a college athletics department, that is hugely helpful, just to get a university on that,
Mhm.
on that resume. I think that is a key first step. And I think making connections, because this is definitely an industry where it's like everybody knows everyone, and the more people you connect with, that's going to help. And I think what you're doing with me, I think doing that with places that you want to work and doing those informational interviews and saying, hey, can I pop in and just like shadow for a day or do like a 1 day internship where I get to know like how this operates. Like it never hurts to ask. We did something like that for one of our student athletes. He's been doing like an internship where he spends a day with each department, getting to know everyone and how things operate. And I think that's valuable because when you're learning more about each area and how it operates, which is valuable. And then two, it's like he now knows everybody. And so for him, when he goes out, he can connect with each of us because he heard our stories and where we kind of came from and worked prior, and can use us as a resource to help, direct him somewhere else. So I think that that's a good kind of starting place to go. Um, did that kind of does that answer your question? I
Yes,
feel
it
like
does.
I kind of spoke
Yeah,
in
you
circles a little
even
bit there,
answered
but
it even more. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but I think it just depends on what, like if you want to work in a specific sport, like football, that's a whole different other beast, right? Like that's
Yeah.
um usually they kind of pull from, not always, but like, football student athletes, or they were interning in football, like as a student assistant, all working kind of their way up, like to be successful there, you have to really like invest the time. Other areas, like if you want to go into advising, like having a grad degree and maybe doing an internship during your grad program. Like I just actually was hiring for a football student athlete advisor this week, and
Mhm.
for a department for something in athletics called the Cameron Institute, and we focus on holistic student athlete development. So it's not just academic advising, but it's like professional development, mental health, like athletic performance. Like how does that mental connection and like brain training help you be successful in the field? So that is obviously like a different path. So I think it's just like for you, it sounds like you might need to like kind of focus in on what might be your interest area, because the paths to each are kind of different.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said about the interests, of course, because I'm sure I can imagine that depending on what sector one is more interested in, then it's better to gain knowledge on that sector. If it's maybe a certain sport or if it's a certain position, then obviously it would make more sense to, of course, like you said, make connections and network. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'd like to interview someone like you, just because I get kind of these little pieces of advice for me in the future eventually, and not just like the NCAA, but just in general for working, because I'm sure these everything you just said is for any type of job. So thank
Yeah.
you. You answered perfectly, honestly.
Okay, good. Whew.
I didn't
Okay,
have any follow-up question to
good.
that was perfect.
Great.
Well, what would you say is a typical maybe day or week like for you? Or maybe now that you just got promoted, have things changed? Or do you have the same responsibilities except maybe they're just modified? How would you say that's different for you now?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because I started this role the week COVID hit. So I actually never made it into the office.
Mm.
So I have been in this role completely virtually. So as we return, it's going to look very different, because I manage a team that normally does like 150 events, plus, stewardship, communications, all that kind of stuff. So to go from like Zoom events to like actually hosting in person and
Very different.
doing
Yeah.
stuff for um, So a typical day for me is I usually do, I almost would say like a typical week is I do, check-ins with each of my staff members. So I have like 8 or so that I'm checking in with, making sure like they're doing project completion, a couple staff meetings. And then kind of right now it's summertime. So we're in kind of strategy mode. So I'm mapping out all the communications that we're going to be doing for the entire year. I also manage like digital fundraising, social, and that kind of thing. And so figuring out how does that plug in along the way, figuring out what events we're doing and budgeting. So right now it's, there's the administrative part of my job where I'm approving every single thing that we're spending and checking to make sure we're tracking it all correctly. So that's a big piece. Hiring, I'm on, COVID had a lot of transition, people going into transition. And as I think we return to office, people are like reassessing what type of work they want to do. So it's like I'm on 5 hiring committees right now. So talking to candidates and interviewing and doing everything that kind of comes with that. And then just working on just general projects. It is changing a little bit because now I've got kind of 2 teams. So I'm going to be onboarding a couple of staff with annual funds. And so it's really for them, making sure that they're working with their individual coaches that to figure out like what type of programming do the coaches want to do this year, what type of events, communications, and what exactly are their annual fund goals? What do they need? And how does that kind of fit into our year? And what do we need to do to make that all happen? So that's coming up really quickly here to start mapping that all out. So it's like a lot of mapping, strategy, figuring out what we're doing for the year. And then we're doing a lot of football stuff right now because we're traveling to TCU for our first away football game. And that's a big game.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a
How
September
it works,
11th.
'cause I'm not very familiar with the sport, but right, it's they usually start to play in July or August.
August is when they usually they'll come back for like camp in the last week of July pretty much. And then
You have to
they're
start
they're
planning
back.
everything way early.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Oh yeah. So it's like booking hotels, like planning receptions, figuring out how many seats are on the plane for donors, like doing all the logistical pieces there and getting tours lined up when we're in Dallas. Like it's like all those kind of different things. And working with my team members to kind of delegate that out. So I'm like all over the place. Like my brain is trying to like bounce around from different things because almost everyone I work with has a very different job. A lot of people manage a team where it's like, okay, I have a team of event planners. It's like, okay, like everyone's doing their events, but here it's like I've got a couple event planners and then everyone else is doing their own unique kind of thing. So it's a lot of like transitioning back and forth with each. Yeah.
Do you usually have a set deadline for when you'd like to? Well, maybe it's kind of hard to have a deadline, but when you talk about these projects and kind of maybe getting in touch with donors for the upcoming year, because I know the summer is usually a slower period because no one's in school, but it also
Right.
might be how you said the period of strategy and kind of getting everything ready for then when school starts again and every event starts again. Would you say having a deadline is key for you, or maybe do you just try to let's say like take it just steps by steps and eventually see how things progress? Because I know depending on how you are, maybe also as a person, that can differ because a lot of people can be like, I want this deadline and I want it done by this day, but it depends
Yeah.
also on the job. So I don't know, how do you usually do that?
I mean, I think with like anything kind of planning for the year, football related and whatnot, that all kind of needs to be wrapped up by August 15th.
Yeah.
We pretty much, and everything else, like all the other details and mapping out kind of like the fall football schedule, invites, all that kind of stuff has to be done by the end of August. And that kind of is a deadline for a lot of the stuff we do, membership guide, figuring out benefits, figuring out how we're communicating everything out for the year, getting that locked in by mid and August is pretty big for us. I think like at any university, there's so many people, like the politics and the red tape and the like
Going
amount and the processes that you have to go through to make things happen make it really hard to stick on deadlines sometimes because it's like check it off the list. And depending on people are already out of the office, they've got other things going on. Like sometimes those deadlines,
Can move.
if it was a hard stop, we'd probably miss a lot of them. So I try to keep them flexible. And I think it's like, okay, here's our flexible deadlines, but it has to be done
Yeah.
by this point, and that's like non-negotiable. So
Yeah.
however my team wants to tackle those deadlines and get there is kind of on them.
As
Because I
long
can't
as
micromanage all the steps in between. Yeah.
No, I'm sure that's very vital, especially if it's something as important as dealing with donors, benefits, everything that you said, because it's maybe one of the most important parts when it comes to sports and say like per se, but not the student athlete part, if that makes sense. Because I've always been told how important donors were when I was in school, and I went to
Mhm.
school on the East Coast, so I had the pleasure of listening to Ivy League donors a lot. That's
And
a
that's a totally different game.
that's
Yeah.
a different world, I've been told.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
it
always
is.
interested to hear how that works from school to school. And I know that the bigger the school, maybe the better the football team is or the basketball team is, because those are the revenue generating sports. That's what's really going to get the donors' attention as well, I think, especially if they are alumni, or most of the time, I think they're alumni. Maybe not, I don't know, but I
Yeah.
would think, right?
I'd say majority. Yeah.
But Ivy
Yeah.
League is another world completely. So it always kind of blows my mind to understand how it works and
Yeah.
how each school is different, especially in the donor section and like the benefits and whatnot. And it's
Yeah.
always interesting to hear. So,
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, Ivy Leagues have a totally different setup, and even like private schools have a different model. If you go to like Stanford for us, that's across the way and our rival, they have a very different model that they operate out of. People who typically like go to the schools that maybe went to a private school, private high school, they go to a private college. Philanthropy is built into that culture of like you just the day you step on campus, you're giving, and that's not a new concept. Where it's like when you work in a public institution, that is something that has to be kind of ingrained in students and alumni after the fact, and it's a little bit harder. And
yeah,
we have a very complicated model for how our sports are funded. Like the money we raise is our operating budget. So it's like, guess what? You're not traveling if you don't have the funds. Like the
yeah.
amount of money we bring in, like the more money we have, the more tournaments our golf team can go play in. So I think our funding model is like that. Not everyone else's is like that.
Course. Yeah. So
Yeah.
would you agree then, depending on how successful the school is for sports, then the better it is for the teams that participate within the NCAA? Like it's easier for them then to participate just because maybe football is bringing in a lot of money, or basketball, or however other many ticketed sports there are. Would you agree then that because I know UC Berkeley is very strong for athletics, just like Stanford is, just like I don't know, maybe I'm thinking of other schools in this, like Alabama also is a very strong sports school. So would you say that then helps with fundraising and whatnot, just because it's such a strong, and academic, of course, but just strong in general then?
Yeah. I mean, I think the better sports perform,
Mm.
the more money comes in, right? Because more people buy tickets, more people make donations. It's like kind of this cycle, right? Like, let's say the better football does, the more people trust the program and believe in the program. So then they give. And then because football has more money, they're able to recruit better players and be able to buy or invest in the program. We can get, new turf on the field. We can um, do a brand new locker room. We can do, XYZ, like those kinds of things. So then we get better recruits, and then hopefully better recruits will lead to better playing. And then you move up and up and up, and you become the Alabama that it is, where it's like, they've just got so much money where it's like they're flying in a helicopter to dry off the field because it was a little wet. It's like, so you build that trust with the donors and the fan base that just kind of continues to help them cycle up to the top. So I would say, yeah. And I think, the better football does. I mean, that's the revenue generating sport. That sport helps pay for the other sports and for athletics to operate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all a big business and
down
it's
effect.
easy to forget.
But I mean, and it,
Yeah. Sorry, I cut
yeah,
you off
exactly.
again, but
No, no, no. Yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah, it is a business at the end of the, I mean, it's higher education is tough because at the end of the day, it's like you got to pay the bills. And
yeah.
when you're operating a big program like this,
Mhm.
the bills are big. And I think, yeah, the better teams perform, the more that comes in. And I think a lot of it's really believing in the coaches too. So hiring good coaches makes a big difference. When you have a team, like our basketball has not been great. They've had some rough years, and when that happens and then you get rid of coaches and bring new ones on, and you have to reestablish that trust with donors, and that takes time. And so you can see the ebb and flow with how that goes.
Yeah,
But
that
yeah, yeah.
mhm. Going back to the original topic, sorry, I tend to go a bit off topic, but
Oh, fine. Yeah.
anyway, what would you say maybe is the most exciting part of your work or that you enjoy per se?
I think for me, I really enjoy working with a team and leading a team and seeing them be successful in their work. I think that probably goes a little bit back to like my grad degree in counseling. I really thought like, oh, maybe I'll go down like a counseling path. And I didn't end up doing that because I found I wanted to solve everyone's problems for them versus like let them find their own way to solve their own problems.
Mhm.
Um, but I really like creating a team, making people feel welcome, and building something with others. And I think it's been a tough year, but whenever I can work with my team and see them succeed and help them do that, that's really my favorite part of the job. And I think what I'm really looking forward to is us all getting back in the office and being able to execute these really big events together. Football game day is a beast. We're running hospitality and tailgates, but we're also doing all the suites, and tending to our higher level donors and doing all sorts of stuff on those days. And so it'll be cool to have everyone together and be able to work on that as one unit. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I understand how hard it's been, especially for universities with COVID. Just as
Mhm.
well for everyone, of course, but especially being out of the office, it's probably been so. I frankly can't relate because I was still in school up until now, so I can only imagine how difficult that must have been to communicate with your team via a laptop and Zoom
Yeah.
calls, and it's probably become frustrating to a point, but I'm happy to hear that it's kind of the connection that you have with your colleagues that it's what makes kind of your experience better just because you don't really find a lot of people like that. I would personally say usually it's kind of like I just want people to do their job and that's it, and I don't really care about the relationships. So I admire that you talk about the relationship and wanting to see them succeed as well, because growing up as an athlete, I was always around coaches that wanted to see me succeed, and I always thought that was a very healthy what's it called, relationship. Sorry, Italian and
Yeah.
English has been going and coming all month, so
Yeah.
I'm like remembering words every once in a while, and I try not to say the wrong one. So
Oh,
I
all
that's
good.
why. But no, I admire that a lot. Would you say there is maybe a least part of the job that you enjoy, or are you kind of neutral then on everything else, or
I think it's more just like the hoops you have to jump through to make things happen, the approvals and just like the day-to-day like administrative stuff of like, okay, for me to buy pom-poms, why do I have to get that approved by four people? Like, when I could just, and
yeah,
I've been at different institutions. So it's like it's funny to see how everyone kind of operates a little bit differently.
right.
So I think yeah, it's just the hoops you and administrative tasks that you sometimes have to do to make something happen. Um, and I think, I mean, I hate seeing people go. I think that's been hard. I wouldn't say that's like the least part of my least favorite part, but I think that's also like a challenging thing that wears on you as a supervisor is seeing people leave. And then that leads you to kind of think about, okay, what can we do to help with retention? And how do we, with these new people that we're bringing in, retain them and make sure that they feel valued and that they feel like that there's a path forward for them and they're not going to become stagnant in their own professional development. So that's kind of a lot of stuff that I'm thinking about too.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, that makes sense with a job as important as yours, because I'm sure there's a lot of approval that you need to get to, for the projects and whatnot. And it probably can become a little frustrating, like you said about the pom poms. But yeah, in the end, it's what really gonna then make, the job. So yeah, I understand
Yeah.
how it can be a little frustrating. But overall, you sound like
Yeah.
you're really doing a
Otherwise,
good job.
everything else is great.
Yeah, besides that,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, you're doing a great job, I'm sure. How would you say your general lifestyle is very affected by your job, or do you have a good balance with kind of working and then living your life outside of your position and whatnot? I hope
Mhm.
you're not completely stressed once you leave the office, because there is some jobs that kind of make you feel that way, but I always ask just to see.
I'm pretty stressed. I think part of it was like I actually am an in person. I'd say I'm an in person person, so I love being in an office. Work from home is not for me because when I work from home, there's no divide for me between when my day begins and when my day ends. It's like I'm one of those terrible people. I do sleep with like my phone next to me, so it's like I wake up, my alarm goes off. The first thing I do is I go on my email and I check to make sure anything hasn't come in between like 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Overnight. And then it doesn't really ever stop after that. It's like constantly checking emails, constantly texting or calling team members. And then when I get home, it's like I didn't go home till like 7:30 or 8 last night from the office, most because I just enjoyed kind of like being in the zone in the office. But that's a typical kind of day is I'll be on phone calls with colleagues trying to figure stuff out or committee meetings until like 7 or 8 sometimes. So it is long days and it is kind of stressful, but I think I love working and I love kind of being stressed. That's like actually like my prime performance is when I'm a little bit stressed out. So I don't mind that, but I think um, as we return to office, as we start up back in sports, and I lose my weekends because football and traveling with teams and events and that kind of thing, I need to be a little bit more mindful about creating that like work-life balance and, a couple days a week being like, oh, I'm going to leave my computer at work. I'm not going to take it home and continue to work at home. So it's something that I'm not good at. And I need to be more mindful about for sure. And I would tell other people don't do what I do. You know, don't sleep with your phone next to you, leave your laptop at work, create that work-life balance. I think it's also just been an interesting year too because it's COVID. Like, well, what else am I gonna do? It's like, okay, I'm gonna go home and sit there, and it's like I could watch
Mhm.
Netflix, I guess, or hang out with my dog. But yeah, I think I'll be better about it as we kind of hit the ground running in the fall, hopefully.
Yeah, for a second I forgot about COVID and forgot that you were at home for basically a year up until now, so I just completely
Yeah.
disregarded that. But no, I
Oh
understand.
no, all good.
Yeah, that's why I was like, "Oh my goodness." I was like, no, that's understandable, because
Yeah.
it becomes kind of a torment after a while, just being in your house all the time. We were in a
Yeah.
very strict situation where, well, at least in Italy, we couldn't even leave the house, and I'm sure it was the same.
Oh, I know. You guys had it like
So
so strict.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I wasn't even working. I was doing schoolwork and I felt like my head was gonna explode. But no, I can definitely understand how then, besides you being a very determined worker in general, how you just want to always be on top of things, how being at home can make that environment kind of worse just because like you need a maybe change of area setting and whatnot. So I
Mhm.
understand that. My father's the same, honestly. He anytime he comes back from work, even if he's at home, he's always checking emails and always want to be on top of everything because that's how
Yeah.
he feels he performs his best. So to
Mhm.
each their own, honestly. And if that's what makes you successful, then by all means,
Yeah.
be it. I hope when you're obviously not working, you still enjoy your time doing something else.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
as long as you're being successful, I don't see why there's anything wrong with that. So in the end, as long as you're
Yeah.
happy, that's my mantra.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
I'm still maybe a little too young and naive just because I haven't started working so much yet, but I hope to stay this way just
Yeah.
because I think being, mindful about one's mental health and whatnot is always very important,
Mhm.
especially when you work. So
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Definitely. Yeah.
So I'm gonna kind of backtrack a little bit back to your undergrad and grad degree. How
Yeah.
relevant would you say are your degrees to the position you hold now? I know you told me you kind of took a different path, but would you say what you studied back in college and grad school did that help you in a lot of ways, or maybe it didn't, or you know, kind of what?
Yeah. I mean, I think no programs can prepare you fully for like the real world, right? Like you
Mhm.
in those situations you can operate in like the ideal environment, but I definitely felt like the programs I chose prepared me well. I mean, sports management was 100% the right concentration, as was event planning, and I really held event planning positions. After I graduated college, just like a couple really event specific roles that I had, like doing large scale events for the university, and I even had my own wedding planning company because
That's
I
pretty cool.
enjoy craziness apparently, which I just thought was fun.
It sounds
So I
fun.
did that. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, something totally different than
Yeah.
what I do now, but it exercises a different side of the brain to be a little bit more creative and whatnot. But um, so I felt like that was super relevant. And then I transitioned into a development role. And it's actually kind of interesting because when I started in development, one of my colleagues actually said that the degree I did in counseling and guidance is probably one of the best that they could have done because when you work in development, understanding people and what motivates them and being able to really have a conversation with anyone, like regardless of where they're at in their life or what their beliefs are or what their goals are, is really key. And I found that that helped me be successful there. And then now, as someone who manages teams of people who, I have everything from an entry level person up to someone who's could be who's 60, like I've got the range and of life experiences and backgrounds and different jobs and different goals. And I think being able to work with all those individuals effectively and bring them together is probably a result of doing those programs. So it feels like in hindsight it actually was the right thing to do, even though I didn't think it would lead me to this path. So
Yeah, I always think that the more knowledge, even if you don't think in the beginning it's gonna lead you to where you are now, is always gonna help. So I'm happy it led you to now 'cause,
yeah.
you love your job, so that's great. But yeah,
Yeah.
I know how you said, no degree can fully prepare you, which is why I studied political science, for example,
Okay.
for years,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
completely out of the realm of sports. And then I
Yeah.
realized that being an athlete, I played sports for 15 years now. I've played tennis, so
Yeah.
at a decent level, I would say. I didn't see myself outside of sports, working. So that's why I then decided to pursue the master's degree in sport administration. And I definitely have a little bit of regrets, but I'm not gonna lie. I'm happy that either way, this is what I'm learning, which is new stuff. And I'm not sure where it will lead me. I'll see eventually, but I think like you said, as long as you kind of have something that pertains to what you're interested
Yeah.
in or your focus, then eventually it's gonna help you. And that's what I'm trying to focus on, especially as being young. I'm only 22 still. So I always try to take that into consideration just because I'm also a foreigner. So I think in a
Mhm.
different way as well than maybe most Americans do. With foreign parents, I
Yeah.
was very set to think in a very Italian way. So it's very
Yeah.
American. But
Yeah.
no, I agree with everything that you said as well. So would you say then, this is probably a no already, but would you say there's a certain type of background that your job would then require? Or I think we mentioned this also a little bit earlier on, but would you say as long as there's some kind of interest mixed with the knowledge and kind of knowing what you want to do, is that kind of what your job can require then later on, or what
So
would you?
I would say development, if you go into that, say you were to go into that field,
Mm,
background, like the degree you did, doesn't really matter. Our chief development officer, who was a senior associate athletic director, political science was his undergrad. And I think he did a master's degree in political science as well.
yeah.
So everyone here has a whole variety of backgrounds. So I don't think like the degree The having a grad is a bonus. And if you happen to do it in sports management, business administration, philanthropic studies, like that kind of thing, that's going to obviously help you. And then I think it's just an understanding and some sort of experience working in college athletics, because in the development world, the pace of fundraising and that kind of realm is just much different than if you were to go to like the university core. And you're a student athlete, like there's a different culture within athletics, right? Like the grind is real, it's like the coaches are there,
Very
like the expectations are higher, the pace is faster, the
mhm.
intensity is way more. So it's just that experience of working in that environment is gonna, we look for that. It's a concern for me a little bit. It's not going to be a reason why I discount someone, but I would be asking them like,
Right.
um, if you haven't worked in college athletics, are you prepared for, the pace of things and the intensity of how we operate? So
That's
I think that's where having that experience. And if you come from that as a student athlete, that's going to help you because
right.
you've lived it, you get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you literally answered my next question.
Oh,
Does
good.
an athlete then help with, maybe kind of starting a new job or kind of being already within the NCAA realm, but not being an athlete anymore, obviously? Would you
Mhm.
say you answered it honestly, so we can really just
Yeah, it does. I think so.
about it, but yeah, but no, I can safely say that as having been a student athlete, I was definitely kind of grounded into a mindset that was so particular because I had never kind of thought in a way that I would become so like my time management what is key
Mhm.
as a student
Oh,
athlete.
yeah.
And obviously coming in as a 17, 18-year-old, I mean, I thought I was a perfectionist at 17, but then once I got to college and started to do everything, it turned out I wasn't. So
Yeah.
whatever happened there. But either way, as
Yeah.
an athlete, the skills that I gained have been so vital into developing into a person in general, not just kind of for sports, but just maybe preparing myself for jobs and whatnot. So yeah, I'm always curious to hear how different jobs kind of like what they require with how your performance is, just because maybe if you work in law, okay, that's a
Mhm.
different animal completely. Maybe you have to have this type of mentality and you have to maybe be able to do this and this and this, but like you work in a job sector just like you told me, then you have to be ready to kind of have anything thrown at you, be ready immediately, and kind of have that set of mindset of be ready to be resilient and be ready that maybe something won't go the right way and bounce back and whatnot. And that's what
Yeah.
we learned as student athletes. And just in general, kind of being in an environment where you have a lot of pressure on yourself because that's
Oh,
and
yeah.
expectations, because that's what I felt the most in my 5 years. And I think I would never even regret it for a minute just because it's what made me become so, I would say, a perfectionist now, I hope.
Yeah.
Um, but still, like it's good that you say that because I always wondered, is being a student athlete in the future, is that going to help me, or is it
Yeah.
just kind of the suffering in the moment and, the expectations of winning matches
Yeah.
and whatnot. But it's good to hear that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So we're getting to the last two questions. I know
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you for too long because I know you're, probably have a lot of things to do.
Oh, all good. All good.
What advice would you give someone who is considering working in your position, maybe, or in your kind of field, or anybody in the NCAA? What kind of advice would you kind of maybe to prepare them? What would you tell them?
I would say, like, if you're graduating from college, I'd say get experience, do internships, do like the student assistantships, grad internships, because the only way that you're going to know what you're going to like is to also figure out what you don't like. And I think I just also said yes to everything. I know people say, like, don't say yes to everything, but I said yes to everything. Every committee I could be on, every volunteer opportunity, anytime I could just show up to something and make a connection or get a little bit of experience. Um, I found those kind of quick wins along the way and kind of added that in. And um, year of college with Cal Poly Athletics, and I worked in facilities and events, and I realized I did not want to work in facilities because I was like, oh wow, you have to be here for every single game, like, and you're the first one there, the last one to leave every single day. Like, how are you ever going to have a life? And so I learned through that, like, okay, that's not the direction I want to go. I need to go a different direction, but still within athletics somewhere. So I did a lot of learning, I think, through that. And I knew I didn't want to do academic advising for student athletes because I was an academic advisor for student athletes and I did an internship in that. And I realized, oh, well, like, this is great. It's rewarding, but it's not enough variety for me. I want something more project management. I want a different type of pace in the work that I do. So I would encourage people to, yeah, just get that experience to figure out what they want to do before they kind of get into the official workforce, because you don't want to spend like a year and a half in a job you don't love and go like, oh no, like this is not the path I want to take. Like, figure that out if you can, before you enter the workforce. And I think just make connections,
Yeah.
like I just said with you, like do informational interviews, connect with as many people as you can, and hear about their paths, because you'll find that everyone has taken a very different path to get to where they're at. My path looks very different than someone next to me. And so I think hearing how people did it can kind of help inform you and the different ways that you could kind of go about getting that experience.
Yeah. No, it's definitely very important what you said about the connections, just because without meeting somebody, then how are you going to get the information you need, obviously.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, for me at least, to how you said, kind of learn their past as well, because how you told me about one of, I think you mentioned something about one of your colleagues that did political science in their undergrad and then a master. Like, I would have never even thought about that, and that kind of
Yeah.
reassured me, because I always had the doubt that, oh, but I didn't study sport management for 4 years in undergrad. Like, is that going to be something that's going to keep me back because I didn't choose
Mhm.
to follow that career path? So
Yeah.
it really reassures me, just because I'm, still gaining information, and you telling me this is definitely kind of giving my perspective kind of a new uh perspective, if that makes sense. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Really intertwined there.
it's just like, okay, like, yeah, I don't want you to feel like I don't want you to have regret as to what program you chose. I think it's just figuring out how you can talk about that program in a way that fits with the role. Like political science, I mean, politics comes into play with any job you're at. And I think if you look at college sports in America, there's a
Yeah,
lot happening there right now.
especially now. Yeah.
So I mean, I think you being able to navigate that and being able to talk about that, especially if you were, let's say, do advising with student athletes, like that's something that you can always go back to and that can help you in a role. So it's just figuring out where it fits. And that could be with anything. You could do a biology degree and you could find a way to weave it in, into a conversation and make it fit. So
Yeah, no, that's very good to hear. It really does relieve a lot of pressure from me, just because I always worry about kind of, again, like what I
oh
did.
good.
So you're helping me a lot. So my last question, and it's honestly maybe one of my favorites to ask, but if you could do it all over again, would you choose the same path for yourself, or would you have maybe wanted to do something else, studied something else, or maybe done development right away, or maybe not done academic advising? How do you feel about your whole process?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Hmm.
My favorite, I would say.
Yeah. Um, I think I'd probably do it the same. I think because if I went back and changed anything, even like maybe taking a job that wasn't the right one for me, I wouldn't have learned what I learned through those experiences. Like every life choice gets you to where you are now, and I think I'm really happy with where I'm at, and I feel like I'm in a good position, and I'm doing what I want to do. And it's like, if you go back in time and change anything, does that affect the rest? Probably. I think maybe if anything, like my first job I was in was like entry level right out of college. I had a really terrible supervisor, like the worst you could have. And so maybe I would go back and tell myself, like, don't stay in that job as
Mm,
long as you did. I was almost there for 2 years because like I'm gonna stick it out. I would maybe be like, maybe get out like a little earlier than you did. But if I think I would do everything the same.
Yeah. That's
And
honestly, yeah. I mean,
you said I figured out what I didn't want to do. And I think that's important.
yeah. No, I know you told me a lot kind of to really be set on what it is that you want to do so you can create that kind of path for yourself. And I think in the end, if that's what you do, then I don't think you'll have many regrets just because that's kind of what you're really focused on. So I think it'll be very hard to kind of look back and be like, oh, I wish maybe I studied this or I would, so that's good
Yeah.
to hear just because again if I would have heard you say maybe oh I wish I would have done a completely different degree then I would have been like oh that's very
Yeah.
interesting but no knowing you a little bit as a person now kind of how you work and stuff that also makes a lot of sense to me just because you're very determined of course
Yeah.
and you really want things to be done a certain way so that's kind of what led you into the position you're in now and I
Hmm.
think that's a great quality to have. And that's how I try to be as well, because I know in America, obviously, again, being very different from Italy, that's how you need to be successful. So, again, like I appreciate doing these interviews just because I learn how each person is different in the way of working, in the way of accomplishing tasks, just because I know honestly, here in Italy, we take work seriously, I'm not gonna lie, but we
Hmm.
prioritize relaxing. We are very lazy
I
people.
know. I love Italy. That's why I'm just like, I would live there because, like, I don't know where you live, but like, I would move to Florence in like a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah, I'm in Rome,
Just
but
okay. You're in Rome. Yeah, Rome is also great. I love Rome.
yeah,
But it is. It's so. I mean, it's like 4 o'clock and everyone's like hanging out.
they
Just like
relax. Yeah,
moseying around, having like their Aperol spritz, and just like enjoying life. And there's something to be said for that, though, right?
it
Like,
exactly.
yeah,
We've had a lot of economic instabilities for sure, and I think that also comes from the jobs and whatnot because
yeah,
not besides our government because it needs a little retouching and but
yeah.
besides
All
that,
governments do.
yes,
Yeah.
as we've learned, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I noticed the difference, especially just because I only lived in Italy constantly for 4 years when I was younger. So I would say I have a very American mindset when it comes to school and when it comes to working within something I'm
Mhm.
interested in. But when it comes to kind of other things, I have a more Italian one just because my parents are Italian and that's how I was
Yeah.
raised. But yeah, no, I'm always interested to see the differences just because it's so apparent how different it is from an Italian. I don't even want to say European because I'm not sure how it is anywhere else, but in Italy,
Yeah.
we're so set on relaxing that I think about it and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, if anybody even did that in America, I feel like they'll be called too many names and won't even be viewed well. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's very different, but,
But
I
it's not necessarily like a bad thing. I think people in Italy are probably happier
that's yes.
than most
That
Americans.
that I can argue for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Like there's no such like they're not you guys aren't having a conversation about work-life balance. Like that's not like a
yeah.
thing that you're talking about. It's just it's ingrained in your culture and how people operate, and that's really how it should be. Um it's oh man, I could talk about this all day because it's just you think about the motivations of Americans and just
No, I mean,
like all
America
of that.
is the
Yeah.
working world, at least how we see it, so
Yeah.
it makes sense that, a lot
Yeah.
of most people, at least, love to work, and that's what they do, for their life and kind of make it I don't wanna say their life's purpose, but,
Our
really
identities rest
yes,
heavily. I mean,
let's say
first thing, I mean, I try not to do this, but like the first thing most people ask you, oh, what do you do for work?
right.
As like that is your identifying, like oh, I can tell a lot about who you are and like we'll understand you if you tell me what you do for work. Whereas if you go to other countries, that's not what you ask each other.
That's yeah, that's why being foreign and myself, I try to make these interviews a little more kind of I modify them so I can understand more how you are as a person rather than just a worker because
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
understand work is important, of course, no problem there, but I always think it's very important to meet someone person to person just because, well, through a laptop, but still person to person.
Yeah.
But just to know how they are, just personality wise and whatnot, because I think that becomes also a very important part in how you perform in your job, or at least I was kind of taught that.
Yeah.
So it becomes, it's all very vital aspect once you get to the kind of working world, just because I know
Mhm.
how different it is from Italy. So
Yeah.
it's different, but in a way it's better, in a way it's maybe not better. So it's nice to see, the contrast.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, yeah, you have a very unique perspective, which I think is really neat. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I try
Yeah.
to kind of, set myself a standard and trying to be a little more different than maybe most people. So
Yeah.
maybe it's unorthodox, I'll agree, but I try to meet someone or kind of have a conversation with someone in a different way rather than, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, how
Mhm.
much do you make? I don't care. I care about what you
Yeah.
do, but I don't care how much you make
Yeah.
or what time you get in the office. Like at that point,
Mhm.
I want to know more about the details of maybe if you enjoy the job, what you do, or you know, which
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
is very. I want to say I appreciate it if somebody asks me questions like that. If I when I start working, maybe because it'll make kind of me feel more. I don't want to say validated, but in a way, maybe validated.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm rambling a little bit,
Yeah.
but
No, no, no.
thank you so much for letting me
Yeah.
interview you. You definitely left me with a lot of good information for me, especially kind of entering this new world of adulting. One for me, and two for kind of looking at jobs. So I appreciate
Yeah.
your time a lot. I have been actually looking to maybe go back to California eventually.
Mhm.
My parents are being transferred to Miami, so they'll
Oh,
be
wow. Okay.
yeah. So I just would like to go back to California just because I miss it a lot, and I know
Mhm.
you said it's highly competitive, which I 100 and 1,000% agree, which is why I need to start now and kind of get
Yeah.
my name out there and do everything because I understand how literally competitive it is. I do have an internship in January, which I'll do. So after that, I think I will want to kind of have something already set.
Mhm.
I'll see eventually, but yeah, I don't think I'll be staying in Italy. So
Yeah.
the downside. But besides that, I would say, yeah, no, thank you a lot. I really
Yeah, of
appreciate
course. Yeah.
your time. I'm sorry we went a little over time. It was supposed to be
Oh no, it's
7 minute hour.
no, you're totally fine.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say too, if you have any follow-up questions or if I can be of any help
Mhm.
at any time down the road, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot. I hope you have a great day. And I
Thanks.
hope you get into the office fairly frequently, at least. I don't know how your
No.
schedule is.
Me too. I'm in the office right now, so I think it's like 3 days a week kind of moving forward, which is good. It's better than zero.